Discover the amazing and touching feuds on Mount Olympus. 10 inspiring myths that transform all. Emily Carson stood at the front of her new classroom, heart racing as she stared at the 20 faces peering back at her, eager and hopeful. College was supposed to be a stepping stone, a place to ignite passion and knowledge. Yet, she felt the inadequacy gnawing at her like a persistent itch. How had she fallen from the prestigious university ranks to this community college? The laughter and chatter in the diner across the street seeped into her thoughts, reminding her of the small-town life she had fled in pursuit of academic greatness. Instead, it felt as if she traded one cage for another, with Jason lurking like a shadow, ready to pounce the moment she faltered. Her fingers trembled as she placed her syllabus on the desk. It was bold, uncharted territory. Ancient myths repositioned to teach resilience and justice. Yet doubt hovered over her like a storm cloud. Would her students see the value she desperately hoped to impart? Or would they dismiss her as just another wannabe instructor grasping at glamour? The feeling of being an outsider clung to her, visceral and unyielding, thickening the air around her. She had spent years trying to fit into the elite, only to find herself in a space she longed to embrace, fighting not just external battles but internal ones that rattled her core. Before she could dive deeper into her first lecture, a startling interruption echoed through her thoughts. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The words echoed in her mind, yet external realities pulled her back. Her grandmother's letters still lay buried in a mound of clutter, each envelope a testament of struggle and triumph, whispering secrets of a legacy she hadn't known she needed. As she taught, she found the duality of her emotions spiraling. She was merely trying to recover a forgotten connection to her passion, but every moment spent engaging her students was met with flashes of Jason's derisive smile. The arrogance that colored his every action seeped into her consciousness. She battled the unwelcome thoughts. Was she destined to remain a footnote in his narrative? The pressure mounted daily. With each passing moment, Emily felt the burden of her students. They saw her as a guide, a beacon amidst their own uncertainties. Parallels to the myths she believed could provide solace collided fiercely with her feelings of worthlessness. The impossible weight of expectations loomed like a sword suspended over her head. The clock ticked down to the moment she had waited for, the chance to put her course on display, to peel back the layers of her work and proudly show each art piece intertwined with the mythic tales she had revived. But as the date drew nearer, doubts transformed into a suffocating reality. What if she failed? What if she stumbled, or worse, became a victim of Jason's arrogance? The thought of undermining everyone's trust sent a shiver through her spine, as she faced the growing realization that her fight was not just with Jason, but a battle against the reflections of herself in the stories she wished to tell. And it was in the inevitable silence of that weighty moment, as she stared into a sea of faces, where uncertain whispers tangled with her deepest insecurities, she had to choose. Would she dare to confront the truth, lay her soul bare, and unveil the veiled shadows of envy and ambition that often ran alongside dreams? The pressure built, each heartbeat echoing a question only she could answer, forcing her towards a precipice where all inner turmoil hung in the balance. Emily stood there, paralyzed by the relentless tide of self-doubt that washed over her. Every moment felt like an eternity as she grappled with the realization that the outcome of her journey hinged on her next decision. Would she walk the path marked by fear, or would she step boldly into the light, confronting both her students' expectations and her own insecurities? The duality of her thoughts clashed violently. A cacophony of enthusiasm faced off against the haunting specter of failure. In that defining moment, Emily made a choice. She would teach not just about myths, but about resilience, her own struggles entwined with the ancient narratives she revered. This was more than a syllabus. It was her declaration of intent to rise above the voices that belittled her. Looking out at the expectant faces, she cleared her throat and infused her words with a new vibrancy fueled by determination. Today, we're going to explore not only the tales of gods and heroes but the significance they carry in our own lives. As she dove into the first myth, the tale of Persephone, and her undying spirit against the darkness of Hades, Emily felt a spark ignite within her, illuminating the shadows that had threatened to snuff it out. The story resonated deeply. Persephone's journey was not just about loss but reclamation and rebirth, mirroring Emily's own struggles against the chains of past expectations. Students leaned forward, captivated, their eyes alight with curiosity. For the first time in days, she felt their energy feed into her confidence. She saw herself not as a fraud but a mentor sharing wisdom hidden in the folds of history. As she threaded contemporary relevance through the rich tapestry of mythology, the connection between her and her students blossomed. However, just as the atmosphere thickened with possibilities, Emily spotted Jason at the back of the room, arms crossed, his expression a toxic blend of disbelief and disdain. His presence draped over her like a wet blanket. A cruel voice echoed in her mind, taunting her efforts. "This is a joke. I senti it? You're not worthy of their attention." The fight within surged anew, and she realized that confronting Jason, this specter of her past, would be inextricably linked to embracing her authority and reclaiming her worth. In that fragile moment, a resolve hardened. She refused to be intimidated, to dwell in spaces of self-doubt that had been so familiar to her. Determined to seize control of the narrative plastered in her mind, Emily decided to tackle this head-on. Drawing from the lessons woven into the tapestry of the myths, she would not only teach. She would challenge them to engage, to question, and to confront their own shadows, much like she was doing now. Why do we allow fear to dictate our actions? She posed, her gaze locking onto Jason's. What if we turned that fear into motivation? What if, like Persephone, we chose to rise despite the darkness? Her voice grew steadier, empowered by fire that burned within a hunger for change and authenticity. She framed a narrative around them, elevating their discussion beyond mere academic engagement. Jason, for all his skepticism, was just another participant in this reckoning. As their dialogue unfolded, Emily found herself positioned as a catalyst for exploration, each student's engagement pushing her closer to realizing her own capacity for growth. There would be hurdles, and Jason would continue to challenge her, but she had taken a monumental step. With the realization of her resilience burgeoning, she recognized that this was only the beginning. Amidst heart-pounding discussions and flickers of inspiration blossoming in her students, a thought nagged at her. What if they could also transform their lives through this exploration? What lessons could they draw from their own mythic stories? But just as these new questions arose, a familiar sensation crept back, the uncomfortable expectation poised like a tightrope. The journey had just begun, and she would need to confront not only Jason but also her deeply entrenched beliefs about where she belonged. The buzz in the classroom swelled in excitement, and within it lay a question that echoed louder than the rest. Who would emerge transformed on the other side of these explorations, and at what cost? As the classroom vibrated with the crescendo of discussion, Emily felt the momentum shift within her. No longer was she merely the teacher. She had evolved into a facilitator of dialogue, a guide for exploration. Each inquisitive glance from her students ignited something inside her, urging her to unfold the layers of mythology laced with personal revelations. The energy was infectious, each student's engagement pulling her deeper into an ocean of newfound purpose. "Let us turn our fears into lessons," she continued, directing her thoughts back to the narrative of Persephone. Where in your lives do you feel like you're descending into darkness? How can you reclaim your power? The questions spiraled out of her mouth, catalyzing unexpected confessions. One student, Maya, raised her hand, her voice quivering with vulnerability. "I feel like Persephone when I'm stuck doing what everyone else expects of me. I just want to choose my path." Emily's heart quickened at this revelation. There it was, scattered throughout the fabric of their lives, were threads of struggle, resilience, and reclamation. The students were grappling with their battles, just as she had faced hers. What can you do this week to take one step toward making that choice? She urged, her presence steadying Maya, and in turn, fortifying herself as other students began to share their experiences. Emily listened intently, drawing parallels between their stories and the myths she had long studied. The once ominous presence of Jason faded into the background, replaced by a chorus of voices embracing their vulnerabilities. She realized her class could become a sanctuary of empowerment, a forum where self-discovery was not only accepted but celebrated. That night, her mind raced. Each student's voice echoed, illuminating the corners of her consciousness that had long been shrouded in doubt. She knew this was transforming her teaching philosophy. It was no longer limited to ancient stories, but an exploration of the human spirit that transcended time. However, in the midst of this revelation, Jason lingered uneasily in her mind. What drove his skepticism? Somewhere within her, a tightness coiled. She didn't want to dwell on him. She craved the uplifting energy of her newfound connection with her students, yet it felt like a shadow waiting for its moment. The next day's class was charged, a palpable sense of challenge hanging in the air. Emily felt emboldened. She would address Jason directly, not out of anger, but as a step toward reclaiming her authority. Jason, she began, drawing the attention of the room. You have viewpoints that differ from the rest, and I want to know, what do you think holds value in our discussions? His gaze bore into hers, the skepticism etched into his features. I think it's all just stories, Emily. They don't translate to real-life decisions. It's a waste of time. The challenge hung before her, a daunting yet liberating moment. She could sense the collective breath of the classroom, waiting for her response. It would seem easy to back down, to retreat into the comfort of agreement instead of facing this personal confrontation. But in that instant, the resilience she had begun to harness ignited once more. Maybe that's true, she countered, her voice steady. But isn't it necessary to reflect on our fears and understand them? To explore how stories resonate in our everyday choices. You called this a waste of time, but perhaps we should consider what are the consequences of ignoring our stories. The intensity in the room shifted. Emily did not just witness a confrontation. She felt it swell within her like a powerful tide. Jason seemed to falter momentarily, his uncertainty flickering in his eyes with each class. She no longer stifled her voice with doubt, yet she remained aware that this was but one challenge in her path. She sensed other fears lurking. The pressure to perform, the weight of expectations both from her students and herself. The journey ahead promised further struggles. It would demand resilience, grit, and an unwavering commitment to the truths she was beginning to uncover. What she didn't know was how uncovering those truths would test her in ways she had yet to imagine. As she left the classroom, a haunting realization settled. Confrontation meant uncovering not just their fears, but her own deepest uncertainties. Was she ready for the tempest that lay in waiting? The following days felt like a fever dream for Emily, the emotional tides of her classroom echoing in the recesses of her mind. Every time she stepped into the room, the air thickened with potential, each student wielding their own narrative like a shield. Yet with every rising discussion, a weight pressed heavier on her shoulders, one that threatened to crush the freedom she was beginning to embrace within herself. She would enter with confidence, bolstered by the knowledge that together they were weaving stories of resilience. But the shadow of Jason's skepticism lingered. Somehow it positioned itself between her aspirations and her reality, an unseen adversary coiling tighter with each breath. It was maddening, and Emily felt it inching perilously close to her core. She needed to confront it head-on. No more avoidance. During class one afternoon, she took a decisive step. I want to change the structure a bit today, she announced, feeling her heart race. Today, let us dive deeper into our personal myths. Each of you will share not only your own story but identify a belief or fear that has held you back. Gasps filled the room, mingled with curious glances. She sensed trepidation like an electric current, both within her students and within herself. Could they truly bare their souls? Could she? Maya was the first to break through the veil of silence, her voice trembling yet resolute. My fear is of failing to follow my heart. I worry that if I chase what I truly want, I'll let others down. Her eyes darted around the room, as if seeking validation. Emily felt the stirrings of her own fears emerge. Shaking off stagnant layers, could she too risk disapproval? As student after student began sharing, Emily felt the walls of her self-imposed limitations begin to fracture. The classroom transformed into a vessel of vulnerability and strength. Each story collided with another, creating something transformative. The connection between them transcended mere conversation. It was a thread weaving them into a tapestry of collective courage. And then it was time for Jason. Emily's heart raced, all eyes turning toward him, the air thickening with anticipation. But rather than dismissive bravado, he surprised them. "I thought I didn't care about stories, but hearing all of you made me think. I guess I'm afraid of being seen, of being wrong about what I value." His confession was raw, leaving a palpable silence in its wake. In this moment, Emily felt a shift, not a battle won, but understanding forged. She stepped closer to him, grounding her next words with sincerity. "Takes a lot of bravery to share what you just shared, Jason. We all have beliefs shaped by our experiences, and exploring them is what makes us human." But was her humanity allowed to take center stage? The question clawed at her. There was an urgency that urged her to bring her own beliefs to bear. The very act of witnessing her students lay bare their fears stirred a longing deep within the desire to be seen as whole. Could she share her own fears without fracturing the newfound connection she had built with them? Thus, in a moment fueled by a blend of resolve and vulnerability, she summoned a piece of her truth. "I, too, fear judgment," she confessed, her voice steady, but her heart raced. "I fear that my teaching isn't enough, or that I won't connect with each of you in the ways I want." As the weight dissipated, the classroom became a sanctuary of open-heartedness. The conversations surged like a river, ebbing and flowing with shared truths, transforming the energy of the room completely. In that moment, Emily discovered a hidden talent. She was not just a facilitator of dialogue. She was a bridge, guiding her students to traverse the divides of their fears. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, Emily felt a sense of lightness envelop her. She had confronted not only Jason but the essence of who she was as an educator. Yet a whisper of uncertainty still lingered, echoing in the recesses of her mind. Had this confrontation merely scratched the surface? In the reflective quiet after class, Emily pondered what further truths awaited her. The revelations that surfaced were profound, yet she couldn't dismiss that something deeper was brewing underneath the surface. What complexities lay ahead that might shake this newfound balance to its core? Challenging herself further loomed ahead, and the next encounter would push her boundaries even more. The opportunity to delve deeper was tantalizing. However, was she ready to unearth the truths that lay just beyond comprehension? Emily sank into her chair, the din of the departing students fading into a lingering silence. The classroom, once a mere space of desks and textbooks, now felt like a sanctuary. The echoes of confessions floated around her, embedding themselves into her thoughts. Moments ago, she had felt buoyed by a sense of community, but now the weight of her unresolved uncertainty loomed larger than ever. Was she truly ready for what lay ahead? Across the room, the paper she had placed on the board earlier, one adorned with the words "fears," written in bold, taunted her. It was a written call to action, one she had crafted with a conviction she now grappled with. The students had peeled back layers of vulnerability, and yet, as much as she tried to process her newfound clarity, her inner voice countered with relentless doubt. Perhaps it had been reckless to expose herself in such a raw manner. Yet there was another stirring within her, a firmer voice that urged her to take the next step. It was one thing to guide her students through their fears, but could she lead herself through hers? Reflecting on Jason's hesitant insights ignited a flame of curiosity within her. She wanted to be seen, and she understood now that required more than just revealing fears. It demanded action, a challenge to the status quo of her discomfort. The next day arrived, heavy with expectation. She stood in front of her class, familiar but transformed. It was time to build on the foundation they had crafted together, a catalyst for deeper exploration. Today, she began, we will not just talk about our fears, but we'll create something from them. The students leaned in, intrigued, Emily proposed an assignment. Imagine you are the hero of your own myth. Craft a story in which you confront your fear. It doesn't have to be literal. Think allegorically. I want you to explore the narrative of your journey. How do you fight through this fear? And what do you learn? An unwavering silence enveloped the room as her words hung in the air. She recognized that the task was daunting, yet exciting. What she hoped for was the metamorphosis of their fears into something palpable, something they could wield. She felt a thrill pulse through her. This was not merely about storytelling. It was about empowerment, about wielding creativity as a weapon against the demons that haunted them. As students began brainstorming, Emily felt a stirring within herself, a movement from the reactive state of self-doubt to a proactive one filled with purpose. In the back of her mind, however, Jason's earlier expression lingered, an image of caution mingling with potential. To transform one's fear was not a simple venture. It demanded confrontation and deep reflection. Days and discussions melted together as the students poured their hearts into their stories. Emily listened with rapt attention as they unveiled their narratives. Maya depicted a phoenix rising from ashes, overcoming her fear of letting others down, while another student wove a tale of a tightrope walker facing the fear of falling without a safety net. Each story was a revelation, illuminating not only their inner struggles but also the collective experience they shared. Through it all, Emily's internal tension crescendoed. With each story revealed, the comfort she initially felt transformed into a suffocating pressure. Observing her students' courage served as a magnifying mirror to her hesitation. Where was her story? How could she guide them deeper while remaining tethered to her own fears? As she gathered her thoughts, a wave of clarity swept through her. She would not lead them into the abyss alone. With resolve swelling within her, she made a decision. She would weave her own narrative into the fabric of their journey. The hesitancy that had gripped her should not inhibit the bond forged through collective vulnerability. With her heart racing, she stood once again before her class. As you dive into your myths, I want to share a piece of mine, she stated, her voice gaining strength. The moment felt surreal, electrifying. Would they accept her? The room held its breath as Emily prepared to shatter her own walls. Would the act of unveiling her struggle culminate in something transformative for her as well? Could sharing her vulnerability redefine her role, deepen her connection, and awaken hidden parts of herself? The air sparked with potential, and Emily sensed she was on the precipice of something monumental. Each word would matter, and she knew she had to leap. How far would this exposure take her? And would she find the courage to fully embrace her own story? Emily's heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder of the risk she was about to take. Standing before her students felt like standing on a vast cliff, perched on the edge of an exhilarating fall. She could feel their anticipation, their curiosity mingling with the same trepidation that churned within her. The pupils' faces, a tapestry of youthful eagerness and uncertainty, mirrored her own hidden fears. Growing up, I was often trapped in a shadow, she began, her voice surprisingly steady. I always let my fears dictate my choices. The room breathed with her, and for a brief moment, she felt their collective energy, as if they were willing her onward. I lived with the fear of failure and the fear of being judged. Those fears held me captive and made me doubt my voice, my worth. As she spoke, memories clashed in her mind, a torrent of vivid scenes that had shaped her. The sting of rejection from projects she'd submitted, the whispers of peers in high school, and the crippling self-doubt that had clung to her spine like a weight. Emily forced herself to bring those thoughts to the surface. This was important. It was now or never. I remember one of my earliest attempts at expressing myself through writing. She continued, vulnerability threading through her words. I poured everything into a story, feeling brave enough to submit it to a local magazine. But when it was rejected, I didn't just feel disappointment. I felt shattered. I thought perhaps this isn't for me. Pausing, she assessed the reactions before her. Some students nodded. Their expressions shifted to recognition. She wasn't alone in this experience. There were familiar threads sewing them together in a fabric of shared struggle. I let that fear rule my life for years, she confessed, the gravity of her honesty saturating the room. But eventually, something shifted. I realized that the fear of failure is a part of the process. Can either bind you to the ground or propel you forward into growth. A hush enveloped the class. Her admission hung like a banner, a testament to confrontations often glossed over. Would they appreciate the risk she took by sharing this? Facing herself was not the finish line. It was the beginning of a journey that would be deeply personal and powerful. I decided to confront my fear head-on, she said, to write again and embrace the mistakes along the way. In sharing this with you, I hope it opens a door. I stand here, not as someone who has conquered all my fears, but as someone still on that path. Just like all of you. Emily's pulse quickened as she glimpsed a shift in her students' demeanor. The air seemed electric, radiating possibility. In revealing her story, she threaded herself into the very fabric of their collective narrative. The vulnerability that had made her tremble now felt like a sturdy ground beneath her. Your stories, she continued, fervent, are valid, and they matter. You are not just speaking words. You are breathing life into your journey. Lean into that fear of judgment because it speaks to your courage to create. A ripple of enthusiasm spread through the room as Emily invited the students to share their drafts in pairs for feedback. She wondered if she could listen to them echo her own sentiments and explore the triumphs that lay hidden in their narratives. Still, a twinge of doubt remained, lurking in the corners of her mind. Had she revealed enough? Would they see her vulnerability as strength, or would they judge her frayed edges? As she wandered among the students, listening as they exchanged stories, Emily wrestled with her own internal landscape. What might she discover about herself as she stepped nearer to this newfound vulnerability? Each interaction promised insight and potential transformation. Then she caught sight of Maya again, who was expressing excitement over her Phoenix narrative. Her friend's passion was infectious and sparked a thought in Emily. If each tale they shared had the power to uplift and inspire, in what ways could Emily further merge her journey with theirs? The realization ignited a new question in her mind, one that hinted at new possibilities. What if the stories we create become a framework, not just for our fears but for our growth together? The concept expanded like a broadening horizon as her heart swelled with anticipation. She pondered aloud to herself, wondering just how deep this path could lead. What awaited her at the intersection of fear and connection? Perhaps the answer lay not only in the next steps her students would take but within her own unfolding growth. With a deep breath, she felt like she was standing before the next cliff, ready to leap. The only question that remained was, how exhilarating would this plunge be? Emily moved through the classroom, a quiet observer amidst a vibrant exchange of ideas and stories. Each student's voice rang with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, drawing her deeper into a landscape that felt increasingly like home. Their discussions, interlaced with personal experiences, blossomed into shared exploration. Yet beneath her growing confidence lay a subtle anxiety. She was beginning to realize how integral these narratives were, not just for her students, but for herself as well. As she listened to Maya animatedly describe her Phoenix narrative, Emily felt an internal pull. There was something in Maya's story, a spark of inspiration that ignited an urge within her to dig deeper. What if, she thought, I could integrate their stories into my own narrative? The classroom filled with emotion. Laughter mingled with moments of solemn reflection. Yet even in this thriving environment, Emily's mind danced with questions. How could she help harness this collective creativity? Were there dimensions to her own story that had yet to be uncovered? Feedback can be transformative, she interjected, her voice steady and firm. When we share our vulnerabilities, we create space for growth. Remember to be constructive, your honesty is a gift. She felt a wave of energy shift in the room, a collective heartbeat syncing with her own. Despite this newfound clarity, her internal dialogue continued to churn. Emily grappled with the fear of inadequacy, wondering if she was truly qualified to lead others on paths she was still navigating herself. What if I can't guide them effectively? That familiar voice of doubt clung stubbornly to her thoughts. Checking her impulse to retreat, she pushed back. You've faced these fears before. You've turned them into strength, she reminded herself, feeling the tremors of determination take root. If I don't embrace this, How can I encourage them to do the same? As the discussion deepened, Emily began prompting her students with guiding questions. What do you fear most when sharing your writing? How does vulnerability bring you closer to your true self? These inquiries opened doors to deeper reflections, eliciting answers that wove complex emotions into the fabric of their exchanges. One student shared a story of betrayal, revealing the rawness of having trusted too easily. Another spoke of the pressure of expectations and fitting into molds that felt suffocating. Each narrative felt like a tinkling of glass, delicate yet powerful, and Emily found herself made anew in every revelation. A thought struck her: what if she curated these tales into a collective project? Each student's story could shine as a pivotal piece, and their combined strengths could create not just an anthology, but a testament to resilience. That glimmer of possibility ignited a fire in her mind. Struggling to contain her excitement, Emily envisioned a framework through which they all could process their journeys. "We'll create a shared writing project," she exclaimed, feeling exhilaration blossom within her. "A collection of stories that celebrates our growth. Each of your experiences will contribute to an anthology. Together, we can illuminate the complexities of our journeys." As the room rippled with intrigue and eagerness, she recognized the intertwining of her own lesson with those of her students. They were all navigating the same terrain, bravely stepping into the unknown together. Yet, underneath the excitement, a voice leered a whisper that questioned her authority. What if they all outshine you? It nagged at her like a shadow lurking just beyond her peripheral vision. Determined to confront this uninvited thought, Emily said, "Let us embrace our authentic selves. Let us be unfiltered in our writing." The challenge born from her own vulnerability began to shift the atmosphere. She could feel momentum building. With the prospect of the anthology on the horizon, Emily recognized that the next chapter in her journey wasn't solely about overcoming individual fears, but about boldly facing the intertwined narratives that had shaded not just her life but those around her. Tension thrummed at the edges of this burgeoning idea. What did this collaboration demand of her? Would she truly be ready to share her truth alongside those she now urged to cultivate theirs? As the student's eyes shone bright with anticipation, a question hung in the air: what authenticity would this brave endeavor require her to reveal? It was time to delve deeper into the weight of her truth, unveiling threads woven tightly into the fabric of their collective narrative. The next leap awaited. The warmth of anticipation lingered in the air, but beneath Emily's external composure, a turbulent sea of uncertainty roiled. As she observed the eager faces before her, she felt a disquieting sensation. A beautiful yet terrifying prospect loomed ahead. The anthology project could be a conduit for revelation, not just for her students, but for herself. How could she guide others to share their truths if she remained shackled to her own? Her mind spiraled as she retreated into reflection, replaying Maya's Phoenix story. It was fiery and fearless, a vivid metaphor for rebirth that echoed in Emily's heart. "I faced my own fire," she whispered to herself, recalling the moments in her life when she had felt reborn. Yet, there remained scars she hadn't dared to acknowledge publicly. The question pressed hard against her conscience. What was she hiding? As she gathered her students to collaborate, Emily felt a mounting pressure. They would be crafting an anthology steeped in authenticity, yet her own narrative felt unfinished, perhaps even unworthy. How could she inspire them to delve into the deep waters of vulnerability if she wasn't willing to swim alongside them? "Let us start by journaling," Emily instructed, her voice a touch firmer than before. "Pour out your thoughts. What stories have shaped you? What moments left a mark?" The students nodded, and for a moment, the room enveloped itself in the soothing rhythm of scribbling pens, an orchestra of personal histories unfolding. Yet even as her students began exploring their narratives, Emily grappled with her internal conflict. Each playful laugh and pensive frown from her class struck chords of admiration overlaid with a sense of inadequacy. What if they uncover profound truths and I remain in the shadows? Her heart thudded, each beat echoing her doubts. As the journaling session dwindled, Emily felt compelled to speak, to reveal. "I want to share something with you," she began cautiously, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "I've always been afraid of exposing my stories, of being too exposed, too real. But I realized that to encourage you to share, I must attempt to do the same. The class fell silent, anticipation hanging thick. In that pregnant pause, Emily confronted her fear. What if her truths paled in comparison? But she sensed a flickering of strength, fueled by connection. We're all on a journey. We all have layers to peel back. She shared fragments of her own past, her struggles, heartbreaks, and moments of triumph. The impact was immediate. Eyes widened in empathy, and the air shimmered with newfound kinship. Here she was, standing raw in front of them, and her own revelation dispelled some of the shadows she had carried. The act of sharing became mutual, a challenge accepted from both sides. Let us reflect on what I just shared, Emily offered, heart racing and palms sweating. What resonates with you about authenticity? What lessons do you find in vulnerability? As her students began to respond, the cycle of sharing deepened and transformed. Their discussions morphed into a tapestry of interconnected emotions, revealing parallels between their lives and hers in ways that ignited a flicker of hope within Emily. Yet, just as momentum took hold, another wave of doubt crashed over her. How would the students react to written feedback on their work? Would they accept her critique, her guidance? What if I overstep? The questions wrestled with her newfound clarity, threatening to encroach upon her confidence. I understand that giving and receiving feedback can be difficult, Emily said, sensing her role growing heavier. But it's important for our evolution as writers. We're all here to support each other. She hesitated, weighing the risks against her ambitions for the project. The prospect of forming a cohesive anthology felt closer, yet she knew there would be obstacles to navigate hers and theirs. As the students began sharing their drafts, Emily felt a palpable shift in energy. She was not merely a facilitator, but becoming part of this brave exploration. But the haunting question echoed inside her. What sacrifices would she have to make to lead authentically, and at what cost? The clock ticked down the seconds, her heart racing. The time had come, she thought, to embrace the unknown. The collective weight of their stories grew heavier. The truths yet to be unveiled loomed over them like a shroud. And as her students prepared to share, one final thought flashed through her mind. What if their criticisms reflected her deepest fears? Would she emerge more connected or shattered in the process? The moment the first draft was read aloud, Emily's world shifted. A quiet student, Nora, poured her heart into her story about estrangement from her family. The raw emotion enveloped the room, her trembling voice weaving through the air like a fragile thread connecting everyone. Emily couldn't help but grip the edge of her desk, a mixture of pride and trepidation swelling in her chest as Nora concluded. The hush that followed felt sacred, reverberating with unsaid thoughts among the students. Each of them, including Emily, sat grappling with the weight of vulnerability. Would their own truths transform into something equally poignant? Thank you for sharing that, Emily began, her heart pounding. Your bravery speaks volumes. The warmth of her encouragement settled in the air, wrapping around them like a gentle breeze. Yet doubt cloaked her thoughts. She realized that while she could guide them, they too were looking to her for strength. Was she truly capable of guiding them through the labyrinth of their narratives? Students began to share one by one, and their stories, fractured, beautiful, and utterly honest, were often punctuated by tears and laughter. Emily witnessed a metamorphosis as each word transformed them. Yet, as the revelations flowed, the voice of her own doubts crept back in. The more they opened up, the more she felt like a mere onlooker within this safe space she had created. It became agonizingly clear that she needed to embrace her role as a leader, not just in word but in action. Emily, Caleb, a usually reticent student, looked directly at her after reading aloud. What do you think? His eyes held an implicit request for insight, and just like that, she felt the spotlight shift onto her. Navigating her fear of delivering critical feedback was no longer an abstract notion. It was palpable and demanding. The question churned in her mind. Do I offer my thoughts or shield my vulnerabilities? In that moment, the dichotomy of her emotions swelled, amplifying the stakes of this anthology. Each student's honesty mirrored her own struggles, pulling her toward a reckoning. I think, She paused, carefully choosing her words. I think you've captured a profound truth. She took a deep breath, letting the air imbue her with courage. But I also see space for deeper exploration. What if, instead of just sharing the moment, you reflected on how it influenced your future? The growth that came from that pain? Emily could see the cogs turning in Caleb's mind, igniting a spark of realization. His acknowledgement of her critique left her feeling exhilarated yet exposed. Had she just validated her place in this journey not only as a teacher but as a fellow traveler navigating the often confusing terrain of self-expression? As more drafts were shared and critiqued, Emily felt emboldened by their camaraderie. The knowledge that they were wrestling with the themes she, too, struggled with became an unexpected source of strength. Each student's evolution illuminated the importance of her own voice. With each piece shared, however, the burden of her own story loomed ever larger. The chasm between their vulnerability and her hesitancy felt insurmountable. Could she genuinely embody authenticity if her own revelations remained entombed? After the class, seated at her desk, the silence felt oppressive. Emily reflected on how fatigue overtook her. The emotional labor of experiencing these stories weighed on her soul like an unyielding shadow. In her heart, she recognized an urgent need to balance the scales. If she was to lead this project authentically, she too needed to connect her own voice to the tapestry forming among her students. Determined, Emily made a plan. In the next session, she would not simply facilitate. She would share another layer of her story. It was time to unearth the truths long buried, to allow them to take flight among the narratives of her students. As she gathered her belongings, a quiet resolve settled in. Tomorrow she would confront her apprehensions anew. Undoubtedly, the journey would unveil more than she anticipated, igniting connections she had never dared to explore. But the question nagged. Could she withstand the fallout from her own revelations? And more pressing, would her students rally around her truth? Or would the very act of sharing fracture the fragile bond they had established? Emily entered the classroom with an invigorated resolve. The weight of hesitation from the previous week felt lighter. She no longer stood upon the precipice but within the welcoming embrace of vulnerability. Today would mark a pivotal shift not only for her students but for her as well. They had woven their fears and triumphs into narratives, and it was time for her to contribute her own thread. Today, she began, her voice steady yet warm. I want to talk about fear and how it has shaped my journey. A collective silence fell over the room, eyes fixed on her with an intensity that mirrored her own anticipation. It was a vulnerable moment, yet she felt a swell of support resonate through the atmosphere. Perhaps they were ready to embrace the deeper layers of her struggle. She took a deep breath, allowing the memories to unfold. Fear has held me back in ways I never expected. Living under the pressure of external expectations and my own insecurities felt like an anchor, keeping me from sailing toward the horizon I envisioned. Words flowed freely as she recounted incidents from her past rejections that formed barriers and the self-doubt that dared to define her worth. During her recounting, she could see Maya's eyes wide with understanding, while Jason's expression softened, revealing a flicker of empathy she hadn't anticipated. Each story she shared resonated with their own narratives, weaving connections that were previously unfathomable. Emily felt the shackles of her fears beginning to dissolve, realizing that she was simultaneously creating space for her students to explore their truths. While dismantling her OWNS, she spoke of her experience with the local magazine, a moment where she had chosen to stay silent rather than face criticism. Emily noticed the shift in her students' demeanor. They leaned in closer, not just as listeners but as allies. When she concluded with the lesson learned that failure was part of growth, she felt a profound connection solidify. They were united not by fear but by resilience, a collective strength emerging from their shared narratives. Each of you has faced fears that crafted your paths, she affirmed, her voice rising with enthusiasm. It's that very vulnerability that can propel us toward growth. The bell chimed, marking the end of the session, yet Emily felt a burgeoning excitement in the air that signaled a breakthrough. Days progressed into the anthology project, marinated in their stories of rebirth and self-discovery. Emily engaged them with fervor. Each interaction heightened her accountability not just as their teacher, but as a collaborator and co-journeyman in the shared pursuit of authenticity. As the anthology took shape, Emily took a major step. She invited her students to partake in a session where they would offer constructive feedback on one another's work and examine how their narratives suggested pathways for courage. This isn't just a writing exercise, she told them. It's about reflection, growth, and forging connections. Her heart raced, knowing she was opening herself up to both the power of their insights and the possibility of exposure in her own vulnerabilities. The day arrived, and the atmosphere thrummed with a potent mix of excitement and anxiety. One by one, her students shared their polished pieces, revealing layers of their souls each reading, accompanied by applause, encouragement, and a rhythm of collective understanding. When it was Emily's turn to weigh in, she saw the expectant faces waiting for feedback. She was no longer their guide but part of the shared experience. "Your stories are monumental," she began, her heart swelling with pride. "In each experience, there lies a sense of bravery. But where in your narratives do you feel you could explore deeper? What are the hidden complexities?" They leaned in, eager to share their thoughts and reflect on her observations, and in that moment, it dawned on her. The significance of stepping into her students' world was transforming her into a mentor who inspired them through shared experiences of both struggle and victory. As the anthology neared completion, the sense of fulfillment was palpable. At that moment, Emily recognized her solidified place not merely as a teacher confined within walls, but as a pioneer of transformation through shared vulnerability. Each story captured not only her students' growth but echoed back her own journey, demonstrating that they could indeed confront fears, push boundaries, and witness the remarkable power of self-expression. The moment came when they gathered for their final reading. Emily felt a crescendo of excitement here. Woven through the fabric of the anthology were not just personal accounts but pieces of a community forged through resilience and acceptance. The applause reverberated through the room, echoing validation she had long sought. "Thank you for sharing your truths and for allowing me to share mine," she concluded, a smile grazing her face. "Remember, we are all authors of our stories, and even within our fears we can conquer." As the semester ended, Emily felt transformed. She understood the significance of stepping into her own power and how vulnerability could breed connection, not just with her students but with her own self. The once constricting judgments of Jason and the lingering shadows of self-doubt no longer defined her. Instead, she emerged with a solid confidence that reinforced her established position as a mentor not just in the classroom, but in navigating life's complex narratives. Each student's story marked a piece of her journey and, together, they had created something monumental, a testament of growth and triumph, a reflection of the worlds they had shared together. As she closed the final chapter of her year, she held her head high, ready to step into the next phase of her career and life without hesitation, armed with resilience and authentic storytelling. In that moment of realization, Emily Carson knew that embracing her truths, just like Persephone, had illuminated a path she had long yearned to walk. And now, dear viewers, you need to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, and show your support for these inspiring narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending because your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Support our journey together.